Hello and welcome to the 12th episode of the Fireside Chat. Today is an open forum. The Fireside Chat is a get-together of Gridcoin participants and anyone from any other community who wants to join us. We talk about all things Gridcoin, decentralization, cryptocurrency, blockchain, anything that is on the docket for the day. If you want a specific topic discussed, feel free to reach out to any of the hosts and we will get it on the schedule. We have a list to pull from already, but we are always open to more topics. And your hosts are myself, I am Jay Ringo, and the Goblin Popper down below.
Hello.
And in the corner, as always, is I Like Chocolate.
Hey.
So before we get into the forum, we've got some news to cover. There is a new GRC pool that is being put together by SAU412 is his nick on Steemit. The pool is called the Aricado pool. It has been out since the middle of May. They've been working on it, building it up, adding new features and fixing bugs for about a month now. So check it out, see what you think about it. And that is now a pool next to the GRC pool, which is run by BGB, which is a long-standing pool that is brilliantly run and has been for a long time. So that's a pretty cool feature for the ecosystem, where you are getting some new new features built outside of the code base.
Yeah, and if I could just throw in some other comment to that is he posts a few times, or they post a few times on Reddit r/Gridcoin, and the most recent post was actually today, June 14th, and he is actually asking the few users that are on it, or people who might want to be on it, what kind of next features they would like. And I mean, some of the features he's floating around are honestly really interesting. Like, for example, add payouts in different currencies, like other cryptos such as Bitcoin, Dogecoin, or PayPal. So he's floating around the ideas of literally alternative currency payouts, and like more information, data exportation, and, things like that. So he is actively developing this. So if you want to get into a pool that's probably like really easy that you can jumpstart on, there are pools that are currently being developed. If you're interested in kind of being part of something that's actively being developed, this one sounds actually really cool. So as long as he kind of keeps up with it, it might actually be a pretty decent addition to the community.
Definitely, I'm pretty pumped to see this stuff get built. We had a couple new block explorers come out months ago, and now we're getting new pools. It seems like the community is really starting to work towards building the ecosystem with a little more depth. Very exciting. And
I'm just wondering, what's the benefit of having like more or less pools active? I mean, obviously, like Goblin said, this one's going to have some cool new features, but just on a general sense, like, is there any benefit to having like a bunch of pools?
I think it really comes down to decentralization, because I mean, remember, a pool has to collect all the rewards from everyone crunching on it and then distributes it. So I think it just promotes the concept of decentralization. But other than that, I don't know if there's one. Ringo, Jim, if you know.
I think that's the main one. For example, GRC pool, which was the only pool for a long time, holds a good portion of the magnitude, because so many people have to jump on a pool in the beginning before they get enough GRC to stake on their own. So they hold, I think, 35% of the magnitude kitty, which is just a lot of magnitude. So when you have a couple pools, 2 pools, 3 pools, it creates a atmosphere, like Goblin was saying, that decentralizes things. And it also creates sort of competition between the pools, like a friendly competition. They'll work to, is my mic going?
It just sounds like an occasional record scratch. I don't know if anyone else is hearing it.
Yeah,
I
I hear
hear
that.
that.
I will try to fix that.
I only say it not because it really bothers me, but I know you're going to be editing it, and you're going to hate it.
It'll
really bother me. Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's my headset.
Throw it out.
It's such a good headset.
garbage.
All right. Pre-folk, where were we? Right. The benefit of different pools. Right. It's what Goblin was saying with the decentralization aspect of it, and it also creates like some sort of a little bit of friendly competition between the two pools to, try and draw more users to one or the other, or to balance things out. Maybe develop different features or provide different benefits of working on one pool or the other. It creates a market, more of an ecosystem for pools.
Yeah, and as
Yeah,
far as the
okay.
as far as the magnitude is concerned, it really doesn't have any. The magnitude, if people move from one pool to the other, the magnitude is just going to follow them. So it, really the same payout occurs for the set of people that are in all the pools. It's just where the payout goes to. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, assuming the pools don't have required percentages of contribution.
Well, that's true. I mean, pools could do that, and they could, I suppose you could set up a pool that requires, an overhead, right? Although I wouldn't subscribe to one of those, but yep.
Yeah, different pools, different things. More marketing for Gridcoin too. We've actually had people asking in the Discord recently, like, why is there only one pool? Blah blah blah. This is kind of cool to be like, hey, there's more than one pool. There's now two pools. You can choose. And I think that's it. All right.
I included the link to the pool in the chat if anyone wants to check it out.
Awesome. I will be sure to remember to put that in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. More news. All right. Anyone who has been following along on GitHub might notice that there is a new design for a GUI being put together. What is his name? Mad Max, I think. It is looking pretty neat. If you want to check it out, I will put the link below to the GitHub thread where we've been discussing the UI for a long time. And we are getting to the point where we are going to post a poll asking the community if they want to accept this proposed UI change, and also asking for foundation funds to pay Max for the work, because it's not development work, so he doesn't get paid by the hour. And we are past the draft phase of that proposals, and it is now in the poll drafts channel on Slack. So if you want to take a look at it, look for typos, ask questions, make it better, just get eyes on it so we can make it the best proposal it can be before we put it out there. Join up to that channel and give it a read and contribute whatever you want to contribute. So I would say look for that poll in the coming weeks, which I am also pretty excited about. It looks really, really nice.
Yeah, it looks really good, I gotta say. Very professional feel.
Could you post a link to that in Discord?
Yeah, I will grab that when Goblin, I think you have a article you want to talk about for the news.
Yeah, there's actually two. One is that the state of Michigan officially made it illegal to try and falsely alter information in the blockchain, which I need to read up on a little bit more, so I won't go into too much depth, but I think that's very interesting that there are now starting to be regulations that attach itself to distributed decentralized information and the alteration of that. So I know Anonymous was commenting that that's pretty much makes it illegal to try and do a 51% attack, which actually sounds about right. And it's just interesting that it's not only now like not like immoral, but like you shouldn't want to do a 51% attack, and it's very hard to do those attacks. But now the government's literally looking at doing those kinds of attacks illegal, and I just think that's kind of cool. Which also adds to the idea of blockchain being legally recognized as a technology that kind of needs to be monitored, which means it's getting under enough people's skin, or it's becoming popular enough that it needs to be.
Yeah, I read this article. It's a very quick read. We will post a link for that as well. I recommend you read it. I think it's awesome for what Goblin just said. This is reasonable regulation where they're making it laws bringing blockchain into the legal realm. And one of my favorite parts of the article is they actually define what a cryptocurrency is in a way that personally I think is pretty accurate. We've talked about that here and in the 1H series, which was the precursor to the Fireside chat. And they define it as, quote, digital currency in which encryption techniques are used to regulate the generation of units of currency and verify the transfer of funds, and that operates independently of a central bank. So that is basically what Gridcoin is. It's a currency that's secured by a blockchain and doesn't have a bank around it. It's a decentralized entity that runs it, an open source group that maintains the code. And the currency itself just comes from the blockchain, from the protocol. And they put that in law. That's awesome to me.
Yeah, I will say one thing, and not to be like a pessimist, but as someone who deals with regulations all the time, I think it's going to be extremely interesting because we don't have the United States or a specific country saying it's illegal to do this. We have a specific state. We have Michigan, which is really cool. But what I'd be worried about is how every other state, if they try to implement a version of this or a similar regulation, how they define a cryptocurrency. Because then we might fall into a trap of every single state has, while very similar, a slight deviation of what they define as a crypto, which would be a very weird legal world to live in.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, that's how the US works. Laws start at the state, and each state has its own law until, one of them or some of them combine, or one of them is proven to be the better law, and then most states sort of adopt that, or it becomes a federal law at some point. But until then, I think you're absolutely right. It could get a little weird.
Wow, that's a really optimistic overview of American legal systems.
Exactly. We're happy people here.
Yeah, I think that's what happens.
It was half joke, but half like. But I don't know. They seem to make a lot of really bad decisions that don't make any sense based on prior, prior examples.
I actually. Oh. Okay. All right. Someone likes his job a lot. All right. I had one guy that just went by and just held it down the entire time. It was lovely. But yeah, no, it's. I mean, yeah. I mean, you hope for the best, but what are you gonna do?
How are you not deaf yet?
Me, I'm already. I don't know. My girlfriend thinks I'm deaf, so I might as well be.
He huffs resin to stay in shape.
But that was one time.
That you remember.
But it worked.
Anyway, so the next article. The next article, by the way, is kind of cool. Also, is that Bitcoin and Ethereum are not considered securities by the SEC, right? So it doesn't really fall under those kinds of security regulations. And I gave it a brief overview, brief read. It's also a really quick read, and I honestly think a lot of these are quick reads mainly because a lot of these authors don't really know the technology well enough, so they don't really know how to expand on it. That's not a bash on them. That's just saying that I don't think they know it. But the basis of it is simply that the SEC pretty much said that their determination has to do with whether or not, like when you buy it, that you have that there's certain reasonable expectations of the people that bought it, and what those expectations are, and so on. So the main issues being that there wasn't an expectation of a return by a third party. Like there's no specific third party that would generate that return, and an expectation could be put on. And then also that it's decentralized, meaning that no central party would put efforts into an enterprise that would effectively manage that. But it is important to note that this is talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that there are a ton of ICOs that actually do fall under that because there are organizations behind them, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I thought it was neat.
Yeah, it's another part of regulation sort of coming to terms with what crypto is in a way, and ICOs in particular, because they're talking about, with ICOs, you're talking about Ethereum tokens. But yeah, so they're mostly, I mean, they said Bitcoin isn't a security because it's not And Ethereum, they said, was a security when it came out, but is no longer a security. And they said many ICOs are in a similar situation, or they didn't say that. They said it's possible for ICOs to start as a security and then change into something that's not a security. Because a security, there's something called the Howey test, which basically asks three things. Do you have a product when you release your ICO, when you raise funding? If you don't have a product, you are under risk of being a security. Do you say, or do investors, are they expecting a return on their investment, like a guaranteed return when they buy the ICO? If they do, then it is under threat of being a security. And the third one I can't remember right now off the top of my head. But ICOs, most ICOs are those two things. You know, you buy the ICO because a lot of the market's saying, buy now, it'll be worth more later. That happened with a token called Munchie. They were actually shut down because they drove their marketing that way so hard. And then most ICOs don't have a product when they release the token. They're raising funds. It's an open source way to raise, or it's a way to raise funds for open source products. But it turns out, I guess, that after a little bit, they're not securities anymore, because the utility thing, I don't really understand that part too well. But that was my takeaway from what the SEC said. And I think that relates to Gridcoin, because we are more like Bitcoin. We're just a blockchain where you didn't buy Gridcoin in the beginning. You proof of work bind it, which is a big reason why Bitcoin was not in a security. So we're pretty much in the clear. We're not a security.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I was terrified I was going to have to follow security laws by the SEC because of all my Gridcoin. But yeah, there's probably a couple whales in here that are probably happy to hear that. But since, yeah, I think if it actually went to court, realistically, since people don't invest in Gridcoin necessarily with the intent of a return, or that a specific organization isn't managing a return for that, then it wouldn't probably be considered that. So yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Awesome. Was there any other news anyone wanted to bring up? Blockchain related, Gridcoin related, anything at all? Oh, I wanted to bring something up. We can wait for the forum for that, because if there is no more news, the first topic, the first question is coming from the SNP, and has to do with UTXO splitting, which is going to be particularly relevant once we implement CBR, which again is well down the road, but will be a thing eventually. So SNP, what you got?
Sure. So if you've been following this for any amount of time, you know that you can take your wallet, split it into a number of UTXOs, a number of little chunks, and each of those chunks can effectively independently stake. And that's a good way of getting around the, I think it's 16-hour, right?
That's right.
Kind of cool down period. After staking, that your coins can't stake again. So ultimately, if you take your wallet and chop it into very, very, very small UTXOs, you completely bypass that 16-hour wait period. So my question is it better for the network if you do chop them up, chop up your wallet? It's certainly better for you because even now you get compounded interest. Or is it worse for the network if you chop up into UTXOs? Basically, what is the ethics behind this, and what is the impact on the network as a whole?
So you guys want? I'll take a shot at this, and you guys can chime in. So first of all, from an overall network perspective, having to a certain point, having more UTXOs, which causes staking efficiency to go up, is actually a good thing, because it's actually going to cause people that otherwise would stake less often to stake more often. And that's actually a good thing. In other words, if let's say a fairly large balance holder were to have their UTXO in one, they were to have their whole balance in one UTXO, as soon as that UTXO stakes, it would basically be on cooldown for 16 hours, and that person is basically out of action for 16 hours. So having UTXOs finer grained to a certain point is will actually raise the difficulty somewhat, and I think result in a more even amount of staking across the network. I will tell you that from a network, from a wallet perspective, you know, it's largely the wallet can comfortably handle thousands of UTXOs without really getting into a big problem. So, you know, practically speaking, as far as the wallet's concerned, the number of UTXOs that folks have is not really that germane. You know, if you were to get into the thousands of UTXOs and you were to run the wallet on a slow hardware like say a Pi or something like that, then you could end up with performance problems where the wallet couldn't get through all the UTXOs during the staking loop. But that's really sort of a corner case. And the last thing I'll add is that, you know, I've done some calculations on this. I've posted this a few different times, but you pretty much don't need to have UTXOs any smaller than like 500 Gridcoin. It's just really not going to help. And you know, if you guys want me to run through the calculation, I can. But you know, staking efficiency, to maintain a staking efficiency of like 90% or better at a difficulty of 1, when you work out the numbers, comes out to a GRC per UTXO of 550 or something like that. So really, unless you really want to climb up the efficiency curve from 90 to like 95 or 98%, there's really no point to have the UTXOs any smaller than that. So while, you know, you could chop UTXOs into super fine grained units, it's really kind of a waste to chop them up any finer than that. And the last thing I'll say is that UTXOs that are less than 0.0125 Gridcoin won't stake at all. And that's because the underlying weight, which is an integer, is the rounding will cause it to round down to 0. And so, you know, if you have very, very small UTXOs, they're not going to stake, period. Anyone want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, isn't it kind of like the smaller your UTXO, the less likely it is you'll stake? So
no,
you know, with
yes,
no?
for each UTXO, but basically it's pretty much linear. So let's say you were to take a balance and you were to chop it up into, let's say it was all, ignore cooldown for a minute, and just say it's 1 UTXO. So the probability, the weighting probability is linear, meaning that the target that's, remember how this works, right? The difficulty is the inverse of the target. The target is set by the difficulty. The actual target that's used by the miner in the mining loop, the staking loop, is actually the target derived from the difficulty times your coin weight. And if you split your coin weight among many UTXOs, each one of those UTXOs has a lower probability of staking, but you have more of them. So if you take your wallet and it's 1 UTXO and you split it into 2, each one of those UTXOs has half the probability of staking at any given time as it did before, but you have 2 of them. So effectively, if you work out the math, it's pretty much linear. So there's really no loss in probability by chopping up your balance into more UTXOs. What you do gain is you eliminate that cooldown problem. So and you guys know in the CBR world, to do some UTXO optimization is going to be a good idea for those people that can benefit from it to a point. And like I said, you know, less than 500 GRC per UTXO. There's some extra hassle that you don't need.
You completely cut out about 30 seconds ago.
I heard you up until about 10 seconds ago.
Yeah. Did you guys?
We should make music out of this.
I think you're having internet issues.
Between Jay Ringo's beatboxing and Jim's auto tune.
Welcome to the Fireside Remix Edition.
We're getting a band together.
No, you were still choppy, Jim. The last thing he said was it's beneficial up to a certain point. He was just reiterating that less than 550 GRC in your UTXO is really you're barely increasing efficiency. You're already at basically 90% efficiency with 550 in each UTXO.
Well, that efficiency is going to change and be dependent on the network weight,
Difficulty.
right?
It's actually
difficulty.
that's exactly right. Yeah. So
so when I mean, last time there were some posts about this. I feel like it was maybe a couple of months ago, when people were analyzing splitting UTXOs. I wasn't totally convinced that it'll actually increase your probability of staking in the long term overall. I'm not saying it's not possible, but in terms of like a really clear mathematical analysis, I'm not totally sure. I think it could definitely be figured out, either analytically or.
I have figured it out. I did.
Yeah, Chocolate. It's the mathematics is not that complicated. The more you chop it up, because of that 16-hour waiting period, the more you chop it up, the less coins you have waiting and ineligible for staking at any point. Right. So the more coins you have eligible for staking, the higher the probability that you are staking.
So effectively the most optimal one is where you're going to stake almost exactly every 16 hours as soon as it comes up for eligibility. Yes.
No, I mean I just staked multiple times today, right? Which is much more than just once every 16 hours, right? That's because I already have my wallet in multiple UTXOs. Not that small of them, but I do, right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is like you should. Okay.
Each UTXO can stake a maximum of once every 16 hours.
Yes, and I'm saying so for each UTXO, the optimal amount to be in that UTXO would be the amount where you'd be very close to staking at the exact 16-hour mark as soon as it's up to be allowed. Yes or no, or is that not how it works?
No, not really.
Okay.
Jim, do you want to take over there?
Yeah, yes, it's a little bit more complicated than that because so the way to think about this is if you take the UTXO efficiency really can be you can take a single UTXO and look at it. Okay, so if you think about it this way, if you have and by the way, am I getting through now? Am I cutting?
Yeah, you sound fine now.
Yep.
Okay. So if you UTXO, you can think of the 16-hour as like a blackout window. Right, and then every other time the UTXO has a probability of staking, right? So if you think about it that way, you want the blackout window ratio, which is the ratio of the amount of time UTXO is spending not staking, to be minimized, which that automatically tells you that the UTXO needs to, actually the UTXO needs to have a small balance because it needs to spend most of its time thinking of waiting to stake, but not blacked out. So that automatically tells you from a certain perspective that you need to have lots of smaller UTXOs because remember, and this is the part that I cut out. If you look at the way the staking probability works, it is totally linear. So if you were to take a balance and you were to have only one UTXO, ignoring cooldown, that balance, because the target in the stake miner is multiplied times the coin weight to actually generate the real target that's measured to see whether you're going to stake or not. That target is times the coin weight. If you split it, the wallet up into say 2 UTXOs, each of those UTXOs has half the coin weight, but you have 2 of them. And so with ignoring the cooldown effect, the probability of staking of is just a function of the balance. Okay, so
the total balance in your wallet.
Yeah, the total balance in your wallet, ignoring UTXO cooldown. You could, if you added 1 UTXO or you added 50, your probability of staking per unit of time, again, ignoring cooldown, is the same. So, but you also have the situation, let's take the corner case. If you have 1 UTXO, and let's say you have a fairly large balance holder, like you guys remember my thumb rule, right? It's 10,000 divided by the balance times the difficulty is the estimated time to stake. So if you had like 100,000 Gridcoin balance. So you're going to, and let's say the difficulty was 1, which it's been like the last 2 days because the whales have been off. So that's 10,000 divided by 100,000. That's 1/10 times 1. So you're going to stake 10 times a day. Well, the issue is if you only had one UTXO, you're not going to stake 10 times a day. You're going to stake at best once every 16 hours. Okay, so that corner case is without getting too gorily into the math, that corner case is a really good illustration of the loss in efficiency that you get, with medium and large balances when you're not splitting them up into enough UTXOs. So, and you guys are absolutely right. The UTXOs operate independently of one another. So each one of those is independently staking. But yeah, I've done the actual. It's not terribly difficult math, but it's also not trivial. So I'm going to actually post the efficiency form in the chat, so you guys can see it.
So following up what I was saying before, I'm not necessarily doubting that maybe there's some advantage to splitting UTXOs, but in terms of the really what the actual benefit of it is, maybe there's a totally analytic solution. I remember reading what you posted a couple of months ago. I don't remember exactly, Jim. So I remember reading it and it was really good, but I remember not being completely convinced that that was a 100% done deal regarding the estimations. But again, that's not even the point I'm trying to make. And so maybe there's an analytic solution that you could do with pen and paper. Maybe it's easier to just do some kind of simulation and then see probabilistically what would happen. But the interesting thing is that, given that cooldown period that you're saying changes the incentive structure, we now have control over that 16 hours. And we also have control over all the other variables that determine how often somebody stakes and somebody doesn't, and how much they get, etc. So, regarding the SNP, regarding the ethics you were bringing up, so I'm not totally. I don't really have a position on it, but I do think that if we do come to a conclusion about what what we do think is the ethical thing, there's a good possibility that we'll be able to structure the reward mechanism in order to incentivize that kind of good behavior, which I think is a positive was like a positive thing.
I mean, oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, I'm just going to say that the formula that I'm about to post, I actually did work up from first principles. This is not an approximation, in the sense that it's an ab initio analysis, meaning that you go through the drudgery of laying out the UTXOs, sort of like a Gantt chart, and then doing some mathematical computation on staking frequencies and the probabilities, and this is what pops out of it. And by the way, if you guys really want to see the gory detail, I've got some people on Slack saw some of my handwriting. I actually posted images of the work a while back of some of this in its earlier stages, but I'll be happy to show that to you guys. But it's I'm going to post this on Discord now. This is actually something that I actually posted relatively recently in response to someone on Reddit. But I think you'll get the point.
And I think what Chocolate is getting at is if it is better for the network to have people split up the UTXO, or if it is better to not have them split up the UTXO, we can change variables in the protocol to incentivize people to do one or the other to make the network healthier in one way or another down the road.
I think so. We've got a lot of things under our control, and I agree with you. I mean, to adjust the incentive accordingly.
What would that change in incentive be? We have no idea. We have no way of knowing who is tied to any particular UTXO necessarily. Especially if they're an investor. So it's the network is blind to this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And for fairness, it should be.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. I'm not. Yeah. So when I said we can design the incentive structure, what I meant was, the incentive structure would affect everyone. But incentive structures can affect some people in different ways than others. So if you have, for example, in the CBR poll, if you had, going in the opposite direction of where that actual poll is going, let's say it was 90% of the Gridcoin minted in favor of interest, and then some massive block reward. Okay, well that's going to, incentivize some people over others, and this might incentivize buying the coin over, minting the coin, etc. But yeah, in terms of the blindness, yeah, of course, this should absolutely be fair. But you can still design incentive structures that will affect everyone, equally, and incentivize everyone to act in a particular way. So, it'll incentivize everyone to not, do something that will harm everyone else, for example, or something along those lines.
I mean, I really don't think that having more UTXOs is really practically going to be a problem for the network, at least within the practical limit of what people are willing to do. And by the way, if you create too many UTXOs, like you were to try and create a wallet that has hundreds of thousands of UTXOs, the wallet's not going to be able to get through all the UTXOs during the stake mining. And so you're just going to lose, you're effectively going to lose part of your staking balance, because you just can't get through them all during the stake loop. So, I mean, a really determined person could probably, set up an array of different wallets and go through that. But that starts to become a very, very esoteric and impractical exercise to try and, quite frankly, get a limited advantage over everybody else. Because again, I'm pointing out that, a fairly granular UTXO layout of 500 grid coins per UTXO results in an efficiency of 90% or greater. And by the way, that's at a difficulty of 1. If the difficulty goes up, the UTXO size required for a given efficiency goes up with it. So at a difficulty of 10, the UTXO required for an efficiency of 90% is not 500 anymore, it's 5,000. So since CBR is going to introduce more net weight, it's also going to push that pushes the difficulty up, which then actually pushes the staking frequency of everyone down, which also then allows you to have more bigger UTXOs with the same efficiency rate. So in practice, people creating like micro UTXOs to gain efficiency is really an esoteric thing, and it's not very practical. Does that make sense to folks?
Yep.
Awesome. So to sum it up real quick, splitting up UTXOs to a certain point is kind of healthier for the network, because it helps the net weight stay stable, because not as many coins go offline when they stake, and that is good for the network.
So question on that, why do we have a 16-hour wait?
Go ahead, Jim.
So that's because there's certain vectors of attack that can occur if you allow the coins to be eligible for restaking very quickly after they've already staked. And that gets into the esoterics of how the block hashing is done. But in a proof of stake type coin, the way ours is done, which is basically proof of stake V2, you have to have a cooldown period to make sure that you eliminate certain attack vectors on the coin. So we can't really. There is some latitude on the cooldown number, but there are limits to what you can do with the cooldown number without opening certain attack vectors on the coin.
Right.
Is it not an attack vector if you have 10 million GRC and split them into 10 million UTXOs?
Nope, because when one of those stakes, it's going to be staking with a relatively small coin percentage. So that's the neat thing about it, is that, you know, your probability of staking on each UTXO goes down, but you have many UTXOs. But when you do stake with those UTXOs, they're staked at a relatively low coin weight. So, you know, their influence over the network per UTXO is also diluted, right? So
I see your point. I see your point. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Jim, is that coming from here? All that stuff?
what's that?
Is what you just posted coming from the link I just posted?
I think that link is the earlier version of it that I was doing as I was working up the calculations for the stuff in the wallet. Yeah, that's right. This is the early version of it. That's right.
Okay, yeah, no, because I'm reading this and I'm like, what's CDT and stuff? Because I mean, I'm interested in probably going through this, like, and trying to figure out, like, how, you know, if it's beneficial, how beneficial is it, and are there limits? Because you said that if you go down to like what 125 or like 1.0125,
1/80th of a Gridcoin. So the actual internal coin weight that's represented, that's actually multiplied times the target, is 80 times GRC. So basically, if you have less than 1/80th of a GRC, that when you multiply that times 80, it rounds off to 0 when it becomes an integer, right? So then you multiply 0 times the target, you get 0. So basically, any UTXO that's smaller than 1/80th of a GRC is not going to stake at all. Period. It can't mathematically. But that's an extreme. I mean, you don't need near that UTXO level to achieve, 99% efficiency. There's just no reason to get down that low.
Well, even so, I mean, it might, bring up other issues in the future that we're not really thinking about right now. It might, I just, I mean, I'm kind of interested because I wasn't really paying too much attention to this before, but I was just, I'm wondering what does CDT mean where you posted it here?
Cool. CDT is cooldown time.
Okay,
so,
I see now. Okay.
Yeah. So if you have, and by the way, the formula rewritten as balance over N is actually probably more, tells you it's more helpful, because balance divided by N, where N is the number of UTXOs, your balance divided by N is the value per UTXO, right? So that form of the equation shows you that it's really not your total balance that's really driving this as much as it is how many GRCs you have in each UTXO. So the balance is the wallet balance, N is the number of UTXOs, diff is diff, as you might imagine. CDT is cooldown time. That's in days, by the way, not hours. So CDT would be 2/3 here, right? And then E is the efficiency as a decimal. So if you want 90% efficiency, you would use 0.9.
And how did you get that first equation? The N equals CDT times.
If you want to see it, I'll send you the math sheets.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's what. No, I'm like very, very curious, because I assumed that what you were saying earlier was relying on that Steemit post, but if that's an earlier version, then maybe
that Steemit post actually ignored UTXO period. So if you actually strip out the cooldown time and the efficiency factor and rearrange this thing, you'll get the simplified formula that we were talking about earlier, right? So the N, CDT, and 1/E-1 terms, if you get rid of those and rearrange it for, you'll get the, you can see the original 3 terms in.
Right.
So
I'm gonna cut this here, guys, just because this has been going on.
Yeah, and they can't see it on the Fireside chat either. So that's right.
Yeah, talking math can only go so far.
Yeah. Jamie, though, really quick, I just wanted to say, so if that's the case, if there's more to this, then I didn't have the full story, so I apologize for maybe skepticism earlier. But if you could send me the full analysis, I'd really love to read it. And
I also encourage you to look at the code, because I actually, when I rewrote the estimated time to stake, which is actually live in the current wallet, I actually commented the code very well. So I'll give you the line number if you want to look at it. But you could actually read the code, and I put in the code what I was doing to compute the estimated time to stake. So it's a pretty good read. It may be a little heavyweight, but I think people could actually understand it if you want to read it. So
I'd be really interested. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So that's a lot of people listening here. That was a lot of background about how UTXOs will split. A lot of that math came from when we were working on the CBR proposal, and we were working through potential outcomes of implementing CBR and thinking, well, how is this going to affect people with huge balances? What are they going to do? How are they going to act? And Jim did a whole bunch of math on this. I will, Jim, if there's a Steemit link to this math that you posted, put it in the chat, and I will link that in the description below. But it is fairly in-depth. If you want to learn more about it, feel free to reach out on Slack or Discord. And I'm sure people will just give you what we've been talking about here. Or come on Discord and come to the Fireside chat channel. Just scroll up, it'll be here. So we are going to move on though. The moral of that story was UTXO splitting, good for the network to a point. And as we get closer to implementing CBR, it will likely be discussed even more in depth because it will be a thing when CBR comes around more than it is right now. So we have about 15 minutes left, 15, 20 minutes. One thing I really wanted to get to in this chat, because it has to do with how we poll, how we determine the validity of a poll, is connected to the CBR poll. Actually, is what we used in that poll, which is called active vote weight. And it's the metric we used to say when the poll was valid. If you want to read about that in depth, you can read the validation section of the CBR proposal. But in a nutshell, active vote weight is essentially using the net weight of the Gridcoin blockchain during the duration of the poll to determine how much vote weight was online, and more or less paying attention, because we assume that people who are staking, actively staking, are paying attention to the polls that are coming up. And we say that is the percentage we're going to use as a validator. So if you have 100% active vote weight, it means that all the vote weight that was active during the poll voted, and that would be 100%. During the CBR poll, it was the first one, so we said something very low because CBR was already polled twice and had passed already, so we said 20%, and we ended up getting something like 143 or 147%. And that means that it's something we're calling super validation, where the poll drew so much attention that people who do not actively stake brought their coins onto the network just to vote on this proposal, which means this proposal is important, and whatever the outcome is will be validated. So I'm curious, I can explain that more if people have questions, but I am curious about what people thought about that process, about using that metric moving forward for how to validate proposals and polls, because we are also actively developing new structures for how to create and validate polls. If you want to be part of that process, join poll definitions on the Slack, and we're having a discussion in there. But yeah, what do people think about the AVW process?
Yeah, I just got a question. Like, so the active vote weight, what is that based on? Because say if a poll runs for like 2 months, are we just taking like a daily average and then averaging all those? Or, I mean, how does that work? Like, what numbers are we using?
So it changes every block, because you're taking the short answer, you're just taking the average net weight during those 2 months. and that's basically it. So if on the first day you have like 1 net weight, and on the last day you have 10 net weight, you're going to have an average of 5 point, and that would be the AVW percentage.
But you said it's based on every single block. So the calculation would be based on however many blocks occurred during that poll, and then taking all those values.
Ultimately, yeah.
Okay, cool. That makes sense.
Did anyone have any thoughts about how that process went, or why we did it, or should we not do that moving forward? Should we use total network weight, total vote weight instead?
I think it's actually a really good idea because, I mean, just kind of the idea that not everybody will keep their coins online, like maybe in cold storage. Yeah, I mean, I think it's generally like if somebody wants to have a say in what's going to happen in the future of Gridcoin, I mean, those people will be staking. So, I mean, like we used to do polls, I think, based on like the total participation of all grid coins in existence, but like you can't reasonably expect 20% to be there. I mean, based on maybe they're lost or whatever. So I think it's a good idea, actually.
Yeah, what you said is actually a big reason of why we did it, because there's coins that just don't exist anymore, that can't vote. So there's technically no way to have a 100% vote weight participation in a poll using total vote weight, because we can't account for 100% of the coins. So that is a big part. And then yeah, having people who are actively participating be able to say, okay.
I think it was a great idea, and I applaud you guys for making it happen. Don't really have much to say other than that.
Okay, what we're doing in poll definitions is trying to determine, we've split types of polls into different like developer poll, protocol poll, funding poll. And we're trying to determine different validation points for each type of poll. And for example, for a huge protocol change, we're thinking it should probably be super validated. It should have to have the people who don't actively secure the network come online to vote in that, because they're largely the people with huge balances, and they have a huge say in the direction of the coin, that sort of stuff. Does anyone have any thoughts on how we should rate those sort of?
Yeah, I have something to say about that. Just the fact that if you're requiring protocol changes to basically have coins involved that aren't normally actively staking, I mean, honestly, I think that's an idea that should be considered more once we actually do implement CBR, and then we can actually see how many coins are actively coming on online. Because right now we got a couple whales that just pop online, get their interest, go away, and then et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, I think if we're going to iron out some hard rules, we should take a look at what the network's actually doing when CBR is active and running. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because once CBR goes, the average network weight during the length of any poll is probably going to be much higher. And it'll be interesting to see how that works. The problem is that CBR isn't going to be implemented for a while, and we want to get these new definitions out sooner rather than later, so that we can get sort of confidence behind the polls that do happen before CBR comes out in terms of validation. Also something you're like popping on and off, Jim. Zippity, do we have a written version of the potential new definitions for proposals? Is that your question? Yeah, you can find the GDoc in the poll definitions channel on Slack. It's on its second or third revision right now. It's been me and Noah who have been putting a lot of work into it. Barton has been involved, and there have been others who've been throwing input in here and there. So just like the proposal that's getting made in poll drafts, also hop into poll definitions and get eyes on the what will eventually be a poll. We don't know how close we are to actually getting this to a complete proposal, but it will eventually be something. So eyes on it, everyone who wants, and feel free to contribute. But if no one else has anything to say about AVW, that was my one thing I wanted to talk about today. So does anyone have any other subjects they want to bring up? Any other questions, comments? ideas for Gridcoin or anything really they want to talk about?
I have one, but I want to, if anybody else hasn't said anything yet, I definitely want to give them a chance.
Yeah, and also if anyone has any ideas, so just as a reminder, the way this works, the way Chocolate and Jibringo and I kind of come up with ideas is usually we just toss around ideas and then filter into what we think is something interesting that could be rambled on about for about an hour, and slightly more professional than that. But realistically, if anyone has any ideas for future podcasts, if anyone wants to host a future podcast or like have a discussion or has anything they want to show off, let us know. Just message one of us, because we can keep coming up with ideas and we can keep driving things like this. But if you guys come up with ideas, it encourages a lot more engagement. We really like kind of doing those ideas as well. So please feel free to reach out, let us know.
Yeah, a great example of how that would work would be Barton's testnet episode and a recent episode we did with Foxify, talking about I forget what it was actually called, but it was like scientific currency and
Science Grid? No, not Science Grid.
No, it was like it wasn't microgrid.
No, it was like Science United or something like that. Anyway,
Ethical currency, something like.
Oh, I was way off.
Yeah, you weren't even here for it, man.
Doesn't mean I still can't pretend I know.
All right, well, if no one else has anything else, Chocolate, go for it.
Yeah, I was just a thought occurred to me regarding, because I think a lot about Gridcoin and sustainability, or really blockchains and sustainability. And there's a lot of people who post about how they run their GPUs during the winter to heat their homes instead of running their boilers. And so I was wondering, well, so how efficient is this actually? And so I started thinking, okay, well, suppose in a typical home or apartment, how much oil is burned in order to heat that unit, house or apartment or whatever. And then, how much hot air is created by GPUs, and say, okay, how much energy is going into both? Let's compare. Let's see which one is more energy efficient. I'm guessing the oil burning is probably more energy efficient. But if you also take into account the fact that the energy for GPUs comes from electricity, which means that we can provide it with renewable energy. And you take into account the fact that with your GPUs you can get Gridcoin. Is it possible to both to basically, in a sense, market Gridcoin as an environmentally friendly alternative to not just mining Bitcoin, but to heating your house in the winter?
I love the idea. Couple of things. Number one, this is a physics thing. The computer's not going anywhere. It's not moving, right? So 100% of the energy that's being used electrically in your computer is being converted to heat. There's absolutely no doubt about it.
Oh yeah. I'm not saying. Yeah, no, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
I've had family members try to throw it out the window.
Meaning, by the way, the oil boiler is actually less efficient.
So yeah, I'm aware this isn't like a very super complicated thing to figure out, but I literally thought up of this like yesterday. So I was
I think it's a good idea. But by the way,
I think be able to attract a lot of people and maybe pique some interest in terms of people who are into IT and green energy and stuff like that.
Here's what I think. Look, it depends upon how the electricity is generated, right? At the end of the day, if you've got a lot of fossil fuel burning plants that are generating the electricity in your area, then you're basically exchanging the oil burning in your boiler for oil burning somewhere else. However, if you have renewable energy that's being used, like I have solar panels on my house, which supply a large portion of my electricity generation. So, in fact, I'm actually doing most of my
Gridcoin. Did you try saying something?
Yeah, Jim. Finish your thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. I literally can't hear a thing you're saying, Jim. I'm so sorry. Like, I'm literally like. Have you been talking this whole time?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
This happened with me in anonymous Discord. Sometimes screws up like
Yeah.
this.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we can hear you, Jim. It's just Chuck was having trouble hearing you.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll wait. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, what I was saying is that really it depends upon how the electricity is being generated, right? So if you are in an area where you've got renewable energy, it's great because it really means that when you use electricity via your GPUs to heat your home, you're using renewable energy rather than like your oil-fired boiler. My house, I have solar panels that provide about 50% of my electricity. So in fact, I'm using the sun to power my, my Gridcoining and also to heat my house to a degree. And but look, if you're in an area where it's supplied by fossil fuels, it's a little bit, you're just moving the fossil fuel burning from one place to the other. But a lot of places have quite a bit of renewable energy, or alternative energy sources. So that was what I was saying. And I hope it got through this time.
I think it depends on that to an extent. But if you have a boiler and you're also mining anyway, why not just get rid of the boiler and use your miners to heat your house? For example, they're actually doing this in larger buildings with Bitcoin mining, where they put I think they're doing this in vertical farms. They put a bunch of Bitcoin mining equipment in the basement, and then they just pump the exhaust into the warehouse above. So they are paying they're still using energy to heat their building, but they're using energy to both heat their building and create something useful and money. So if they were mining Gridcoin instead of Bitcoin, they would be helping science, they would be heating their building, and they would be also getting a little bit of money back for that.
I agree.
Only thing, J Ringo, I just want to point out is the other thing that a boiler does is it makes hot water for showers, which please don't throw your boiler out just because you don't want to use it to heat your house. I do not I don't really turn on the heat or use the AC because my place is very well insulated and I just like to use blankets and save on energy. But I still keep it for when I want to take a shower. So we do want to promote cleanliness on this show. And I just want to make sure that J Ringo does not represent the entirety of GRC community in the lack of showers.
Like some of us use forced air, all right? And
if you want to have a bucket with a couple holes in it and just stand under it in your living room, you do that. I still recommend you have a boiler for when your guests come over.
Look at this fancy guy with showers and things.
Yeah.
Wait, so
Somebody's rich.
Can you summarize Jim's what he said? Because I didn't hear any of it.
Yeah, he was saying it depends on where your energy is coming from. If you're getting it from solar energy, it makes sense. But if you're getting it from fossil fuels, you're basically just transitioning from oil to a fossil fuel, which is, it has benefits, but it's still not the same as like getting it from solar power.
Oh yeah, but that's the same argument that you could use that for a lot of a lot of anti-electrification arguments. But the point is that if you're getting your heat from a boiler, that boiler is using oil, which they almost always do. That's objectively making carbon emissions. The whole point of transitioning to something that uses electricity is that so now you can get your electricity. Now you can get your electricity from your energy from renewable sources. It's the same thing with electric cars. I mean, if we were just powering electric cars with energy that we got from coal plants or or natural gas plants, then yeah, of course that would be that would be just that would be pretty much pointless. But the whole point of electrifying the vehicle is so now you can get it from renewable energy and you can cut out the fossil fuel use.
I agree. That's right. The renewable energy movement is linked to this whole idea. But I'll go back to I'm not sure who said it, but the thing we got to remember is a boiler doesn't do computation, right? So the beautiful thing about this is not only can you have the chance to move it to at least some renewable energy, depending upon where the energy source is. But at the same time you're heating your house, you're also doing computation for science. And that's something that Gridcoin has on everybody else, right? You know, the folks that are doing Bitcoin to heat their building, well, Bitcoin's doing nothing but useless hashing at the end of the day. And, you know, if you're doing Gridcoin, you're doing something for the advancement of science while you're heating your house. And that's something that's important to point out. I think it's, you know, that's part of what makes us different. So
I think if we pool together all of our GRC, we can start a company to make a GPU and water boiler hybrid for people's homes. Like oh my God.
Oh yeah.
In fact, every time you take a shower, it has to start crunching GRC.
Well, I use air-cooled stuff in my own machines, but my children have water-cooled things. I mean, maybe I'll hook up a manifold to the CPU, and you know, we'll get a.
Yeah,
right?
You want to shower, little Timmy? You better start crunching World Community Grid.
Actually, I saw a post on Steam a couple months ago. I think someone actually heated their fish tank off of their mining rig.
What, to cook their fish? You people are terrible. What the heck is this? Who heats a fish tank?
But it shows that yeah, you can do it. Little Timmy can shower by crunching for science.
And cook his pet fish, yeah. You people are terrible. What is this?
Chocolate, I like this idea, but I have no idea how it would, like, that's a big project.
It's not as big as it might seem, actually. So, I mean, I really came up with this yesterday. I haven't investigated it super thoroughly, but like in an almost childish way, you know, if you ignore, you know, room temperature and, you know, humidity and air pressure and all that stuff, and just get down to the basics of it, you know, you put your, kind of like put your GPU like in a bag. You know, you measure how much hot air comes out and at what temperature and the energy that's contained in there. You measure how much energy it actually took to create that amount of hot air, and then you take a look. And there's definitely 100%, like probably a lot of data on this already. How much, you know, how efficient are home boilers. And then you would compare the two, and then you would take and add into that the electrification, which allows for green energy, and the other stuff. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
The GPU, there's no boiler made that's 100% efficient.
You're
Like
breaking
totally
up
falling
again.
apart.
Now you're good.
now you're good.
Am I good? So I already know the answer. The GPU is going to beat the boiler hands down, because there's no boiler that's 100% efficient. Some amount of energy has got to go up the flue, and that leaves house. So whereas the GPU is being all is 100% being converted to heat. There's no doubt about it, and it's all going into the room.
Well, Jim, the only like complicated factor is if like your electricity is generated with a coal-fired power plant. Right. In which case, you know, in the coal power plant, some of the energy is getting lost, because that is not 100% efficient. I mean, you're not even getting close to the Carnot efficiency.
That's exactly right. And by the way, you know, the economics of it may be different too, in that, you know, when you add up all the different utility costs, the electricity may be more expensive than the oil, to, you know, on a per unit, per joule basis, right? Or per BTU basis. But,
yeah, and probably is.
Yeah, but you know what? Like I said, you know, I'm a big fan of renewable energy. And as the renewable energy is on the upswing, right? I mean, there's solar being installed everywhere. There's wind farms. There's other things being done. You got hydro in a lot of places, which has been around a long time. But, you know, in general, the percentage of our electricity that's being supplied by renewable energy is growing, which means that this argument that I Like Chocolate is making gets stronger and stronger over time. That's my point I'm making.
If we were to, I think one of the biggest issues is an engineering problem. With furnaces is basically, I mean, it's just a fire that, with a boiler, it's a fire that heats water, and then you have to pipe the water around a building. So you could have the GPUs heat water and then just pipe the water around the building, but that unit that heats the water is very complicated. And then if it's forced air, it's just a flame that heats air, and then the air is blown around the building. So how do you actually take the air from your computer, from your GPU, and pipe it around, either heat water with it or get the air around your building. So it's not just like
Air pipes.
Yeah, ducts, but it's a furnace.
Your
is not a simple
GPU
thing.
becomes your furnace. It's
Yeah,
honestly pretty
effectively you'd have
straightforward.
the cooling system. So I actually don't have a boiler. I have one of the on-demand heaters, right?
Oh,
So what
yeah.
happens is it's really efficient. It doesn't use any power at all if I'm not using water or anything, right? And it sits on the wall, and what happens is if I turn the water on and it detects a certain amount of flow, it kicks in heaters, which heats some pipes that are wrapped around like the water pipes, and then the water pipes, as it's going, will pretty much get up to a certain amount of temperature and go through the pipes into the house and shower and so forth. But the point is like effectively you have enough GPUs whose coolant systems are wrapped around the cold water that's going through the pipes that are then going into your house. You can, once you heat the water, you can do heating, you can do showering, you can do whatever you want with the water. You just have to get the water hot. So I feel like integrating the coolant system with the water pipes is probably the easiest way with a GPU.
That's not simple. That's not an easy
Well,
thing.
I'm not saying it's simple. I'm not going to go make this jerry in 25 minutes.
All right,
I'm
all
just
right,
saying
good,
it's
good.
like, it's not this brand new science that needs to come up. It's more or less a redesigning that needs to happen, not this technological creation.
I mean so that's going into water, and that's even way further even than what I was suggesting. Although I totally think it's a cool idea. I mean, I was just talking about treating the GPU like a space heater, which it totally.
Yeah, you could just put a computer in every room. I mean, literally, yeah.
Yeah, like,
Right? I mean, I know that sounds simple. That sounds simple-minded, but that's really, for most people, that would be good enough.
It would, like,
You know?
if you had one GPU running, 250 watts in your room? Yeah, I think it's, so what I was bringing up was like, okay, can we actually make this into a rigorous, like maybe not publishable in a journal or a conference, but maybe like in an actual, like, something semi-serious, because I think it might pique a lot of people's interest.
Maybe it's
I think
something
you can. I think you can do some really neat calculations with that stuff. And
How many?
most GPUs are in a pretty narrow peak wattage range right now. I think that the limit of the 6 or 8 prong PCI connector to the GPU, they're limited to like either 250 or 275 watts, right? And most of the GPUs, they can get pretty close to that if you're crunching like heavy duty stuff like Einstein or GPU Grid or one of the ones that really stresses the GPU. You're going to get pretty close to the wattage limit. So you're probably running like 250 watts output from the GPU. And the CPUs, most CPUs put out anywhere from like 70 to 130 watts, I think, at full tilt.
I think we
Does
should get a
anyone know
project
the
going.
math for how many pies I would have to fill in a room to actually heat my house? Because like all of my computers I'm crunching on are like pies, and I'm just imagining me velcroing pies to the ceiling and being like, "Don't worry, honey. I know we're going to bed cold, but Einstein at home is going to make us warm." Like I'm gonna assume everyone's talking about like pretty much a case. Like I gotta buy a big computer.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to turn this into 2 practical things we can actually do. One I think would be pretty fun is just this winter, see, like there's a bunch of people in the community with a bunch of computers, have them save the records from last winter and how much they spent on heat, and have them try and do this next winter, like heat the rooms, put a computer in each different room and see what happens. And another one with the post that Anonymous just shared with Linus Tech Tips actually doing this, heating with a CPU or with GPUs, I think. What if we like reached out to people like him or groups like him who do this stuff and say, look, you did this really cool thing. What if you use those to mine Gridcoin, like, and made a video about that? Like, you're heating you already have this built. Throw Gridcoin in a video about it. Maybe.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I mean, he seems like a reasonable guy. He kind of already mentioned, he plugged, BOINC in one of the recent episodes. And yeah, I tried to get on the forums and plug Gridcoin, and it went nowhere, but you can go try.
Hey, maybe. But Chocolate, I think you're talking more about doing like calculations to see if it's even possible, right?
I'm in support of everything. I think it's all I don't see why we can't do all of that, honestly.
Yeah, well, let's keep talking about it. Let's see if we can't get. I think it would be really fun. I'll do it this winter with the computer stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, like I was talking about it like in a very purely like scientific but like you could totally just test it. People could do tests at home and say testimonies like, oh, I actually saved money with the Gridcoin and blah blah blah, or I broke even, or I didn't break even but it was worth it, etc. It just I feel like sustainability stuff can really draw a lot more people in.
Well, JD Heater says he's actually done this when he was hosting an Airbnb.
Get it? His name. It's his name. There's Heater in his
JD
name.
Heater.
Yeah, I know. I saw that too. I was like, what? That was very suspicious.
Oh, right. We should have talked about the news, but we'll close on that actually, Snip, because we are overtime right now. So
Great.
First, does anyone have any really small, quick, like minute things they want to say before we wrap it up with what Snip just posted? All right, then this was should have been said at the beginning with the news, but it's GDPR related. So Einstein at Home, right, is the most recent GDPR project where they are run out of a university, so they're playing it safe, where they are basically doing what World Community Grid did, where they're asking entities to get a token and sign a form that says they're not going to do X, Y, Z with people's data, essentially. Except Einstein at Home already has this token, and we are, I think we're all good. Yeah, NeuralMiner is leading the charge with all the projects. He's reached out to every project asking what they're going to do to GDPR, regarding GDPR, and how we can maintain our stats collection no matter what they do. So kudos to him. Like, it's a lot of work. And apparently we have a token from Einstein, so we are hopefully going to be bringing them back into the whitelist soon. And WCG, we're still waiting on. So we'll keep you as up to date as we can on that. But with the other projects, I'm pretty sure we've heard back from 6 who have said they're not really doing anything yet. They're planning to wait and see. But we are in contact with them, and we're waiting to hear back from the others regarding what they're going to do. But we have reached out to all the projects, and by we, I mean NeuralMiner, and we are prepared, or at least sort of prepared, should more projects set up this sort of system. Yeah, so that's basically a summary of it. If you have any questions on it, do just ask in Discord or Slack or wherever, and we will keep you up to date as best we can. Does that answer questions?
Yes.
Okay. Then with that, we will be wrapping up this episode. Yeah, it was a fun talk. We covered a couple of subjects. Next week, we will be going back to a single topic. We haven't chosen it yet, but we do have a list, so keep an eye out for a post on what we will be talking about. And other than that, we will see you next week right here on the Gridcoin Discord server, 8 p.m. Eastern, midnight UTC, and it's on Thursday. So have a good weekend, everyone.
Toodles.
See ya.